How is it possible that in 1948, the newly created state of Israel defeated 6 or 7 Arab nations simultaneously in its war of independence? Shalom, everybody. My name is Akiva Gersh. Welcome to Israel in 5, where we give you everything Israel in 5 minutes. Please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or want to add to the discussion, please do so below in the comments. So, as I was saying, the War of Independence, 1948. Let's just zoom out a little bit, get a little bit of context, right? British mandate was set up in the 1920s to help the Jews create a Jewish state. That didn't really happen. They gave the mandate back to the United Nations after World War II, and the UN came in and came up with the UN partition plan. The plan was voted on in the UN. It passed. The Jews celebrated, accepted it. The Arabs denied it and prepared for war, which started the very, very next day, November 30th, 1947. The first 6 months or so of the war, the British were still here, so Arab countries around Israel were not looking to get involved, right, until the British would leave. So the first part of the war, these first 6 months, were fought locally between the local Jews and the local Arabs living here in this land. Once the British said they were going to leave, literally moments before, hours before they officially left altogether and ended the mandate, the British mandate, the Jews declared independence on May 14th, 1948. And as soon as the British left, literally at midnight, the Arab countries around Israel attacked. And the war goes on for about another year with various countries, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, and others. How is it possible that this little country in the middle of all these Arab countries, this newly created country with very few resources, was able to defeat all of these countries simultaneously? Well, there are a few good reasons, right? One reason is Jewish ingenuity, right? We have to think out of the box. We have to be creative. And this happened in many different ways, right? We're faced with many, many challenges and therefore needed to come up with new ways of fighting. One thing was creating a new weapon, right, called the Vitka, which was this really kind of simple, not so fancy artillery piece, which made a lot of noise and sounded horrifying, but didn't have such good aim and didn't really do much damage in any battle. But it was used and it actually did work because of all the noise that it actually created. It actually did often scare off the enemy and help the Jews go to victory in those different places, in those different battles. Another thing that led to the Jewish victory, the Israeli victory in the War of Independence, was the disunity amongst the Arab nations. They weren't together. They weren't unified. They each wanted a different thing, a different piece of the land. They had different plans. They weren't working together to our benefit, thank God, right? But that was another piece, right? Another reason why or how the newly created Jewish state was able to be victorious against all of these countries simultaneously is one, or another reason is Golda Meir goes to America and does this whole big speaking tour and tells the Jews living there, like, look, whether or not we fight, that's not up to you. We have to fight. Whether or not we win could be up to you, right? Help us out. And she raised $50 million. $50 million in a few weeks of speaking in different places, different Jewish communities in America, and took that money and came back and used it towards the war effort. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, said when the history of this war is written, people will say that it's because of one woman that we won this war, and that woman, of course, is Golda Meir. You had people, specifically during the first part of the war, while the British were still here, they had these rules, these laws, making it illegal to make weapons, to import weapons, and the Jews were at a loss because the Arabs were sneaking in all kinds of weapons across the border from the bordering neighboring Arab countries. So Jews had to go and smuggle in all kinds of weapons, all kinds of machines and equipment that they needed for the war effort. There's incredible stories about that. I'll just share one quick story. It's a really wild, wild story, but a group of Jews went to Spain and they pretended that they were filming a movie, right? And for the movie, they got hold of this old kind of, warplane, right? That was probably used in World War II, and they used it for the scene, and they got the film crew, and they had the actors and the actresses, and the whole thing was set, and they filmed it. And at the last part of this scene, it was a pilot saying goodbye to his girlfriend, and he gives her a kiss, goodbye, and he gets into the plane and he flies away into the sunset. Click, stop, however, cut. Is that what you say, right? So they filmed the scene, and they packed up and they left and they went home. Well, what happened to that plane? That plane that flew off into the sunset kept flying, kept flying, kept flying until it got all the way to Israel, and they actually used it in the War of Independence. One of many, many wild and crazy stories. And again, another great example of Jewish creativity, of thinking out of the box. How do we get the equipment that we need in order to fight and to win this war? Another reason is something called Machal, which is this organization that was created during the war for volunteers from outside of Israel to come and help. Jews who had military experience in various countries, even non-Jews, anybody. It was open to everybody, and many Jews came and many non-Jews came as well. And you had these incredible, experienced soldiers, even Air Force pilots who came to help Israel in this moment of great need. I'll share another, really quick story. There was an American Jew who came, and he was a pilot, and he didn't know any Hebrew, but he came because he was a Jew and he wanted to help. And his plane got shot down, and as he's parachuting, he realizes he sees a bunch of Israeli soldiers coming towards him in the fields, and he's like, "Oh my God, they're going to think I'm the enemy. What if they shoot at me?" He's like, "How can I tell them really quickly that I'm not the enemy?" He couldn't speak anything in Hebrew, right? So he's thinking in his head, what can I say to tell them that I'm Jewish, right? And so he screams out, "Gefilte fish." That was the first thing that came to his mind. They got the point. They knew he was a Jew, and they left him alone and took care of him. Anyway, all these different ways of being creative during this war. And I'll share just one more reason and one more way that the Jewish state won this war despite the incredible odds against it in terms of number of countries fighting against Israel, number of soldiers they were up against, and the sheer military force that each of these countries and all of these countries had together. And that was something that we call in Hebrew, in brera. There was no choice. Right? The Jews fighting in the War of Independence knew that they had no choice. They had no choice but to win. Where are they going to go if they lost? Back to Europe? Right? Back to these anti-Semitic places that, killed them and kicked them out. There was nowhere else for them to go. They knew that if they didn't win this war, there's going to be nothing left of them, right? And that's really a force that has continued on since 1948 to be a great force, a great motivating force towards victory for Israel and Israeli soldiers in all of our wars. We know that if, God forbid, we lose one war, that could be the end of Israel. Right, so the same kind of creativity and ingenuity that fueled and motivated Israel in 1948 continues to do so until today. And thank God we have a much stronger, much bigger military, right, and more resources in our hands than we did in 1948, which makes the story of 1948 that much more incredible.